While we wait for the next generation of Tacoma to come out, which the rumor mill says is just around the corner, Toyota is giving this generation Tundra and Tacoma a little bit of extra style with the optional Nightshade package. The Nightshade package in this Tacoma is based off of the Limited trim, so we have very similar features and functions to the Limited trim with the extra style of the Nightshade Edition. Interesting bit of trivia, the Nightshade family includes tomatoes and potatoes, but Nightshade Edition sounded an awful lot more exciting than Tacoma Tomato Edition. Although, as with many things in life, I suppose it really depends on the sauce. Up front, we have what I think is the best look for the Tacoma available in America right now. You can see that instead of the chrome accents, we get these blacked off accents, full LED headlights up here, LED fog lights below, black accents as well. The Nightshade Edition is available only in 3 colors, black, this gray here, and white. I think it looks better in this gray color because the black accents show up a little bit more. Not all Nightshade Edition vehicles in Toyota's lineup have the same grille. I think the Tacoma gets the best looking grille of the bunch. This has a really 3D design to it with some knurled elements and just a lot of definition that we don't see in the regular Tacoma grille. The Nightshade package is an add-on to the Limited trim, so you can get your Tacoma any way you would normally be able to with the Limited options and then add the Nightshade package onto it for $1,000 or a little bit more if you want the matching tonneau cover in the back. We have unique 18-inch alloy wheels, all the badging, the Limited badging right back here, the Tacoma badging on the doors becomes the dark color as well, and then we have the blacked out door handles. That means that the Nightshade is available with the cab that you see here and both beds, 5-foot or 6-foot beds, and 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. Since this is based on the Limited trim of the Tacoma, keep in mind that the payload capacities are a little bit lower than the base versions of the Tacoma and definitely lower than some of the competition as well. In this model, payload capacity is 990 pounds, which means you could put 2 of me in the vehicle and then about 600 pounds of stuff behind. Towing capacity will vary based on the model that you're looking at. This model is rated for just over 6,000 pounds. Under the hood, there's just one engine option. It's a 3.5-liter V6 engine that produces 278 horsepower and 265 pound-feet of torque. It's mated only to a 6-speed automatic transmission, and your choice of rear-wheel drive with a limited slip-rear differential or 4-wheel drive. The model that I'm taking a look at today is the model with 4-wheel drive. We also have a TRD air filter right here, which is kind of a nice touch. This is one of the washable varieties, so you simply wash it and then reinstall it in the vehicle after it's been re-oiled. Some folks have given this V6 engine a hard time because it is closely related to the one that we find in the Camry V6 and of course the previous generation Sienna and a number of Lexus models out there. I have to agree with that a little bit. This engine doesn't have the same kind of pulling power that we find in some of the competition, especially some of the turbocharged competition. It remains to be seen exactly how the new Nissan Frontier performs out on the road, but it definitely gives us more power and a decent number more gears than we find out of this engine combo. How comfortable you find the Tacoma's front seats will likely depend on how long your legs are. I'm 6 feet tall and this seat is a little uncomfortable for me. I feel like I'm sitting practically on the ground with my legs really stretched out in front of me. It leads to a less comfortable driving position than I find in the Ridgeline or in the Colorado or the Canyon or the Ford Ranger. The seating position is not too far off what we found in the previous generation Frontier, but it does look like the new Frontier is going to have a bit more of an upright seating position. It really seems to have to do with the height of the cab that we find in the Tacoma. Everything here is just a little bit shorter than we find in some of the competition, leading to a more relaxed driving position for a taller person. However, if you're shorter than I am, then this might actually be more comfortable for you because you will be able to get your legs a little bit closer to the ground, a little bit closer to the pedals, and find a more comfortable driving position. Hopping into the back seat, you'll notice that the doors open really far. That's going to make it a lot easier to get things in and out back here. And the rear seat bottom cushions are also a little higher off the floor than the front seat cushions. That means that I certainly have a little bit more thigh support back here as an adult, but if I were to try and put my head back towards that headrest, my head is definitely touching the ceiling. I'd have to kind of tilt it to one side in order to actually get back there towards that headrest. The cabin here is not exactly huge. If I scoot all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat's all the way back in its tracks, so you can see my knees definitely dig into that seat back. I can't really put them behind the seat. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that again this is based off the Limited trim, so we have a pretty standard sized moonroof over the driver and front passengers' heads. Height adjustable shoulder belts and height adjustable headrests for the driver and front passenger. But instead of an irregular pattern, Toyota used squares to give this a different and interesting texture. You find that on the seat bottom cushion and the seat back cushion, but not on the bolsters. Moving over to the front doors, we find a small amount of soft touch material just above that armrest and the armrest itself. The rest of the door is made from hard plastics, including that bottle holder down there at the bottom. Moving over to the dashboard, we find the same dash that we've had in the Tacoma for a little bit after its most recent partial refresh. This generation of Tacoma has been refreshed since it was first launched, so we do see a mixture of original components and some new components. So depending on which Tacoma you're familiar with, this could either look exactly the same or it could look just a little bit different. One of the big changes, of course, since this generation of Tacoma launched is the infotainment system, which supports smartphone integration now. I don't happen to have that enabled. Instead, I'm just using the Bluetooth interface right now. Below that, we have the controls for the dual zone automatic climate control system. These definitely look a little bit more old school compared to some of Toyota's more recent models. To the left of the climate controls, we have the engine start-stop button, the controls for the four-wheel drive system, buttons for the blind spot monitoring system, the transmission mode, it's basically just the power mode on or off. There's also a button for the parking sensors, the rear windows, USB input for the infotainment system, a Qi wireless charging mat right there, and a button to turn it on and off. Two pretty decently sized cup holders right below that, and then a pretty standard gated style shifter. We see this in a lot of other Toyota models. There's a manual mode over to this side that also engages the sport mode. We have another set of cup holder and storage area. I guess you could put a juice box there, something like that. And then a handbrake. This is one of the few pickup trucks in America still left with a manual handbrake. Between the front seats, we have a padded center armrest that reveals a fairly small storage cubby. The instrument cluster hasn't changed too much over time, but we now have a color display in the middle. This is part of Toyota's Safety Sense package because this vehicle now includes radar adaptive cruise control, and they needed to adjust some of the displays in order to include that particular feature. The steering wheel is one of Toyota's truck designs. It's a 4-spoke wheel with sport grips up top, perforated leather sections on each side, and you'll notice that the cruise control controls are still on a stalk that moves with the steering wheel. But the buttons for the adaptive portion are over here on the wheel itself. Distance and then lane keeping right here. We have buttons that manage that multifunction LCD between the speedometer and tachometer, infotainment buttons over here on the left side, and then some dedicated phone buttons. 0 to 60 happened in this model in 7.8 seconds, and as you can hear, that nearly 8 seconds is accompanied by a decent amount of engine noise in the cabin. Some might find that engine noise pleasing, but personally I don't think this V6 sounds quite as good as the larger V6 that we find in the Toyota 4Runner. The 4Runner and the Tacoma once upon a time shared more drivetrain components, but at this point in time, they actually have different engines and different transmissions. This gets the slightly newer 6-speed automatic, the 4Runner gets the older 5-speed automatic. But for some reason, neither of them gets Toyota's more recent 8 or 10-speed automatic transmissions. Hopefully that is something that we see in the next generation Tacoma. You'll definitely notice that this transmission is a little bit more hesitant to shift than some of the competition, and those shifts take longer than some of the competitive automatic transmissions as well. Everything together means that this is just not going to be quite as engaging to drive out on the road. In my braking test, it took 140 feet for this model to stop from 60 miles an hour back to 0. Remember that in a pickup truck, the bed back there is empty in my testing, and therefore that is going to drag out that 60 to 0 stopping distance a little bit, versus something like a 4Runner, which would have a bit more weight on the rear. As far as handling ability goes, I'm going to have to give this model a B. The suspension is fairly well sorted as long as it's empty. It is a little bit bouncy out on the road here. I'll talk about that more a little bit in the ride Obviously, most pickup trucks weren't designed for corner carving, but it is worth noting that you will find a little bit more engagement, I think, in the new Ford Ranger, as well as the Honda Ridgeline. The Ridgeline is really an interesting and strange competitor in this segment because it's the only front-wheel drive-based pickup truck in America right now. It's based off the Honda Pilot platform, and it has a torque-vectoring rear axle if you choose all-wheel drive. In a way, the Ridgeline is more of a pragmatist's pickup truck because it's obviously not designed for the same sort of rugged duty as the Tacoma, but it does come across as very pragmatic. It also has better sorted driving dynamics when we're talking about on-road driving. The suspension in that vehicle, the all-wheel drive system, just everything about the Ridgeline setup definitely makes it a little bit more capable in terms of on-road handling, but a little less capable in terms of off-road handling. As far as ride quality goes, however, I still give this model a B, and that's because the Tacoma suspension feels a little on the bouncy side, to be perfectly honest. So out on a rougher road like this, or out on a paved road, it can sometimes just feel a little bit unsettled in the rear, and it doesn't necessarily improve if you put weight in the bed. Remember that the payload capacity of this vehicle is relatively low, so with 2 of me in here, I could put maybe an extra 2.5 of me in the bed back there. Total payload in this model is 990 pounds, and that does include the driver and passengers. In my cabin noise test at 50 miles an hour, I got 74 decibels in this cabin. I was a little bit surprised because that is just about as loud as the last TRD and TRD Pro models that I drove. I had thought that the more on-road focused tires of the Limited and Nightshade editions would make it a little bit quieter in the cabin, but that doesn't actually turn out to be the case. I think it's just the amount of sound deadening that we find back there in the rear of the cab and around the front wheel wells. Fuel economy is definitely an area where the Tacoma lags behind the competition. Over a week of mixed driving, been averaging about 15 mpg in this vehicle, and when I tossed in some towing, not too much weight, it was about 2,000 pounds overall, the fuel economy dropped down to 12.6. So definitely keep in mind that if you're looking for a fuel-efficient pickup truck, there are actually going to be a reasonable number of full-size half-ton trucks that are as efficient or a little bit more efficient than this. In fact, to be perfectly honest, Toyota's half-ton truck is really pretty close to this in terms of general fuel efficiency. In fact, to be perfectly honest, Toyota's own V8 Tundra is not really going to be that far off this in terms of average fuel economy. Bottom line, the Tacoma has aged pretty well, and I would definitely keep in mind that age. The Tacoma is not exactly a spring chicken. This same basic vehicle has been in production for quite some time, and that is pretty core to the Tacoma's reliability mission. The Tacoma is legendary, perhaps almost as legendary as the Toyota Hilux in terms of its reliability and dependability reputation, and a lot of that is really predicated on not changing things too drastically. The Tacoma has really been an evolution rather than a revolution over its lifetime, and that does mean that this lags behind the competition in terms of power and towing ability and handling ability and braking distance and fuel efficiency, etc. But if you are really interested in being able to just have a vehicle that is practically indestructible, then that is where the Tacoma plays. But you have to be willing to give up some of those other aspects of the vehicle that you might be interested in. For me, I definitely have to say that I'm torn. While I certainly value dependability and reliability, I also value things like a quiet cabin, high fuel efficiency, etc. And those are areas, again, where this lags the competition. Truck sales are definitely on fire in America, and that includes mid-sized trucks like the Tacoma. Tacoma sales have more than doubled since 1995. Since 1995, the competitive landscape has also changed pretty drastically. The Ford Ranger has been canceled and then been resurrected, harmonized with other world market Rangers with a standard turbocharged engine. We have a turbo diesel available in the Chevy and in the GMC. And then we have a new Jeep Gladiator rather than a Dodge Dakota. And that's before we even talk about the Honda Ridgeline and the upcoming Hyundai Santa Cruz, which will be joining the pickup truck party in the US very, very shortly. Starting at $26,250 for the 4-cylinder engine, $28,510 for the base V6 engine, the Tacoma is not the least expensive entry in this segment, but it has a well-deserved reputation for dependability, reliability, and of course, off-road ability. And that's one of the reasons that the Tacoma has not changed too drastically over the last few generations, because Toyota was very interested in making sure that at least some of those off-road accessories would still work on newer Tacomas, and that meant that they couldn't change as much as they might like. It's possible that the next generation Tacoma might be a more radical departure from this formula that they've been using up to this point. Now, if you're getting the base Tacoma, keep in mind that the 2.7-liter 4-cylinder engine is not terribly powerful. It's 159 horsepower, and it's mated to an older automatic transmission. If you want the V6, that's going to be the one that I was driving today, that's going to be $28,510. And the limited V6, which is the basis of the Nightshade version, started at $39,005. Then you add the Nightshade package on top. Our first competitor is the Ford Ranger, the number 2 selling pickup truck in 2020 in this segment. It starts less expensive at $24,820 and is an extremely good deal because the Ranger comes standard with a 10-speed automatic and a 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. That may not sound terribly exciting for a small pickup truck, but it is honestly one of the best towing engine and transmission combos available in this segment. If you're regularly towing 5,000 or 6,000 pounds and you're interested in a combination of good fuel economy and some of the best 0 to 60 performance and best hill climbing performance in this segment, I would get the Ranger with that 2.3-liter turbo. Now, if you're worried about long-term dependability or reliability, say over 150 or 200,000 miles, then you might want to consider getting a naturally aspirated V6. But honestly, for most folks out there that are keeping their vehicle 5 to 7 years and under 100,000 miles for the first owner, this is not too much of a deal. If you're a second owner, or again, you're looking to keep your vehicle really long-term, then you might want to look elsewhere. However, Ford's turbocharged engines have been very reliable. Even though the Ranger hasn't been on sale too long in the United States, this Ranger has been on sale outside the United States for a while, and that's why its interior feels a little bit behind some of the other Fords on sale. It feels a little bit like a pickup truck version of the Ford Escape, the previous generation Escape. That's also part of the reason that the Ranger doesn't exactly look like a member of the Ford family on the outside, at least to the American eye, because it's coordinated a little bit more with European and other world market Fords. That is likely to change the next time we see a refresh of the Ranger. It seems that Ford might give us a specific nose for the United States market that keeps it a little bit more in line. So it is possible that we will have the same sort of mechanical underpinnings in the Ranger outside the United States, but it's possible we may get a different bumper just to please some folks that think it doesn't look quite like a Ford. Likely thanks to the newer drivetrain, payload and towing figures are definitely higher in the Ranger than in the Toyota Tacoma. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit smaller, but still has some pretty decent payload and towing ratings, the Ranger is definitely going to be an excellent option. But oddly enough, there are no overtly off-road formats of the Ranger from the factory, so there's no corollary quite to the TRD and TRD Pro models of the Tacoma. Next we have the Chevy Colorado and the GMC Canyon. These are priced relatively similar to the Tacoma. The Colorado starts at $26,395, and like the Tacoma, starts with a 4-cylinder engine, but it is significantly more powerful. It's 200 horsepower out of a 2.5-liter more modern 4-cylinder design. That's mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission, or you can get GM's 3.6-liter V6 mated to an 8-speed automatic. If neither of those engine options appeal to you, there's also an available 2.8-liter turbo diesel. The Colorado and Canyon definitely have some rugged off-road versions, especially the Colorado. If you want to know more about that, there is a video of that model on my channel. Payload ratings peak a little bit higher in the Tacoma than in the Colorado or Canyon, but for most folks out there, the average configuration of Colorado and Canyon is going to be very, very similar to the average configuration of Tacoma. However, towing ratings are always going to be higher in the Chevy. Next up, we have the Jeep Gladiator. This is a little bit different than the others because the Gladiator comes only in off-road versions, to be frank. It has solid axles front and rear, Dana 44s. We have the availability of a front locker. This is one of the few vehicles available in the United States that has a front locker in addition to a rear locker. And you're going to pay for all of that off-road ability because the base price is $33,565. You can really look at the Gladiator this way. It's the base model of Gladiator is the approximate corollary to some of the more off-road capable factory versions of the Tacoma, say the TRD or TRD Pro. And then if you want to take things to the next level with the locking front differential, locking rear differential, the diesel engine that's available, the 33-inch tires, etc., all that's available from the factory on the Gladiator. Not all of that has a corollary within the Toyota lineup, or honestly within the lineup of any of these other mid-size pickup trucks. The obvious downside to that is pricing. The Gladiator can get pretty pricey. The less obvious downsides to that are fuel economy and on-road handling ability. The Gladiator is not quite as good to drive on-road as some of the other options because it is more focused on off-road ability. Next up, we have the Nissan Frontier, and I'm talking about the new Frontier that hopefully I'll be able to drive soon here, probably around June or July of 2021. I've been really intrigued by the new Frontier because we see some of the same formula that we've seen Toyota use before. Nissan decided not to redesign the entire frame of the Frontier. Instead, they just tweaked it here and there when needed to accommodate the new body and new engine and transmission. That means that some off-road accessories may still work on the Frontier when it's finally released. Since nothing was wrong with the Frontier's frame, this seems like a perfectly sensible move because they were able to spend more money on a new engine, a new transmission, and a completely new interior and exterior. The engine is going to be a new 3.8-liter V6 engine. We actually saw that last year in the 2020 Frontier. Nissan did this weird TikTok thing where they changed the engine and transmission one year and then they changed pretty much everything else about the vehicle the next year. The new engine is a 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6, producing 310 horsepower and 281 pound-feet of torque. This is probably going to be the best combination of horsepower and torque other than something along the lines of the Ford Ranger. But if you're looking for a naturally aspirated engine rather than a turbocharged engine, this would be the one to pick. It's mated to a new 9-speed automatic transmission as well that appears to be a Mercedes 9-speed automatic design that's being built in a Jatco factory for Nissan. Now, Nissan won't talk too much about that transmission, and I haven't driven it yet, but hopefully I will be able to drive it very, very soon. I would expect that pricing is going to be pretty similar to the current one, so probably about $27,000. Remember that there is no 4-cylinder engine available in the Frontier. V6 is standard. I would expect the payload figures to be pretty similar to the current model, say 1,500 to 1,600 pounds, depending on the suspension that they decide to give it. The frame is likely going to be fine with a little bit more weight. It probably will all come down to the suspension, and I expect that towing figures are probably going to be right around 7,000 pounds, pretty much where we see the current generation Frontier as well. Of course, at the moment, a lot of that is speculation because Nissan has yet to release official pricing and there are a whole lot of specs that we just don't know yet on the Frontier. But if you want to see what it looks like, I have a video on it on my channel already. Bottom line in the Tacoma is pretty easy. If you're looking for the most reliable, most dependable, and likely lowest maintenance cost pickup truck in this segment, that would be the Tacoma. Interestingly enough, if you're looking for the best resale value, that may or may not be the Tacoma depending on exactly which chart you're looking at. Something like the Gladiator has had absolutely insane resale value so far. Another reason to look at the Tacoma is if you want to accessorize your truck aftermarket, because there are so many different accessories, aftermarket tweaks, aftermarket this, aftermarket that, available for the Tacoma that we don't see in the other trucks. That's largely because the Tacoma is the best-selling truck by far in the segment, by an enormous margin to be perfectly honest, and it has been the bestseller for so long. And then it's absolutely not hindered by the fact that the Tacoma has not changed in a while, so manufacturers are more likely to produce accessories for a vehicle that has a really broad pool. We certainly see that in the Tacoma. Now, unfortunately, the Tacoma doesn't really excel in too many areas other than dependability, reliability, and maintenance costs. If you want the best payload, the best towing, the best power figures, the most comfortable seats, the best gadgets, etc., you won't find those in the Toyota Tacoma. Now, hopefully we'll find those in the next generation Tacoma, so be sure and stay tuned for that video coming up just as soon as Toyota will release details on it. In the meantime, let me know what you think about the Tacoma down there in the comment section below. What would you pick if you were shopping in this segment right now? Find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, Instagram, all those other social places, and of course, you can head over to the merch store at aoamerch.com. I'll see all of you later.